Hi, folks. Um, Hopefully this will be a rather brief video. I'm going to go through sort of the highlights of week 3 so that you kind of know what to expect. Um, I apologize. Look, the bags under my eyes are rather disturbing, huh? Bags under my eyes and crow's feet. Okay, just a couple of bookkeeping items. First of all, I appreciate everyone who has been participating on the discussion boards and turning in um, your journals. Do try to be specific in your journals, and a lot of you are, right? Quoting specific lines, talking about specific language in what you're reading, talking about your how the particular work is connecting with you. A lot of you, are doing quite well with that. Please try to hit the 1 page minimum on that. Okay. I was very lenient on journal number 1, but moving forward, please try to do that. Journal number 2 is intended to cover what you're reading during the time in which the journal is due. So that would be um, essentially week 3 and 4, week 3, basically, week 2 and 3. So, you know, um, a lot of you just kind of actually, in my opinion, copped out in Journal 1 because you talked about um, stuff that you or not necessarily Journal 1, but in some of the discussion board posts because you talked about stuff that maybe you'd read before, that like, for example, Edgar Allan Poe, and didn't really mention much of Dickinson and Whitman and so forth. And anyway, and I understand, this is a summer course. Um, limited time for some of you to engage in the course, and I get it. I do ask, though, humbly, that you watch the videos that I actually record. Okay, so the video on Dickinson that I recorded, the video on Whitman, and then moving into this week, week 3, the video on Stevens, the video on Elliot. Also, I really, really strongly recommend, and this is why I didn't record a video on um, William Carlos Williams, because the lecture that Allen Ginsberg, the Ginsberg lecture that I've provided for you, is really, really good, and particularly the second half, the second video on prosody, is excellent. So I really highly recommend that you listen to Ginsberg's lecture. It's in two videos, lectures on William Carlos Williams. Um, you know, like I said, at least watch the videos that I am preparing for you. Aside, of course, aside from reading the material, you want to read as much of the material as you can. I again, though, I recognize that there's no way that you can read all of the stuff. That's just not going to happen in a 5 week course. But the material that I spend time recording and so forth, I do ask you to at least take a look at, because that's in essence, that's like, as if you were to attend a lecture, right? So anyway, um, but again, that being said, I do get, you know, the time constraints for some of you. Some of you have um, very impactful, stuff going on in your lives, and I appreciate that. Um, but also, you do want to try to get out as much as you can from the course. I mean, you're taking the course. Um, Secondly, with regard to the discussion boards, you do need to respond to somebody else's post before I will post your points. Okay, so if you're looking and you don't have a score, if you submitted your first thread, uh, say like week 1, and you don't have a score for it, it's because you didn't respond to somebody else's post, and so forth. So please do that. Um, see, anything else I need to go over? Yeah, and as far as the journals, and anything else that you submit, like the drafts and so forth of your essays, I prefer that you submit them as Microsoft Word documents, not stuff pasted into the submission box. I prefer you submit it as Microsoft Word documents or PDFs. Secondly, uh, to see my comment on your material, if you go into my grades and you click that, and you actually have a score for an item, and you click it, you should my comments should come up. Okay. Um, all right. Let me screen share and we'll go into week 3. Okay. So here's our page. And again, um, if you haven't submitted your material for week 2 yet, um, it's not the end of the world. Um, I am not, counting off for lateness this semester. But as I've said previously, if you want feedback on your stuff, you should submit it in a timely manner. And obviously, there's a cutoff point for everything, right? Um, the last day of the course, obviously I'm not going to take any late material past the last day of the course. But anyway, moving on to week 3. Okay. Um, here's some heavy hitters in the modernist / imagist movement. Um, again, I did a video on Eliot. It's but really I really would ask you to take a look at Wallace Stevens. Um, and some of you might really get him to pound, despite the fact, I mean, because he is a brilliant poet, despite the fact that he's a fascist, right? Is unequivocally, right? I mean, he was a fascist, literally in uh, in Italy, during Mussolini's era, and allowed to, sort of broadcast, and anyway. Hart Crane, very sort of a bright flame that flame. This is a cliche, and I apologize, but a bright flame that burned out really quickly. He he but he produced some intense work. If you watch the Crane documentary that's there, it'll give you a context for his work. His poem "The Bridge" is very much in the tradition of Whitman, not necessarily in terms of how it's composed, but in terms of looking at something like the Brooklyn Bridge as a monument to American ingenuity. Um, and like Whitman, perceived the Staten Island ferry or Brooklyn ferry, I'm sorry, crossing Brooklyn ferry, right? And he's looking forward to the future, and he's speaking to people that would come in the future, right? So Crane is an important figure. Again, if you want to take a look at the bridge, um, you know, have at it. Look at the documentary. That'd be great. William Carlos Williams, in my opinion, is a sort of incredibly influential and important figure. Again, um, his famous statement, "No ideas, but in things," right? So he's very much concerned with the language of the people. He's concerned with that which is tangible. Um, and the documentary sort of hints at an underlying eroticism in his work. Even though, in his uh, personal life, he wasn't necessarily all that flamboyant, so on and so forth. But in his work, there's a certain degree of eroticism there. Um, but anyway, the point being is that really he like Whitman, he's democratizing uh, poetry in the sense of he's concerned with the language of the people. He's concerned with uh, you know um, everyday things in a lot of ways. and so on. He becomes a tremendous influence on Ginsberg. As if you again, if you watch the piece on Williams' prosody, you will see that. Um, but definitely Pound in his way, definitely Crane, and definitely Williams are very much in this Whitmanian tradition, as is Stevens in his poem, which I didn't include because it's long, very long. Auroras of Autumn, he evokes Whitman. He talks about Whitman as well, but uh, Yates I included because you really, I mean, when you talk about this period of of poetry, it's hard not to include Yates. So I included Second Coming. I don't remember what else I included here, but yeah, Second Coming. Um, and it's a powerful poem. Yates himself is a very sort of enigmatic individual. He he actually at one point just he says he won't have anything to do with Whitman at all, so he's not in that vein per se. But he was a member of the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. If you're familiar with Western mysticism at all, I mean, he's is an interesting figure, um, very much an influence on Pound, um, and so on. And then Pound, of course, was friends with Stevens. Not, I'm sorry, not Stevens. With Williams. Pound and Williams were friends. Um, Pound was an early influence on Eliot. Um, and so Pound is kind of this sort of key figure in the Imagist or Modernist movement. Uh, if you remember from last week, the poem of the Pact that I actually put in the Whitman folder is Pound sort of wrestling with the influence of Whitman, right? So anyway, moving on is to not make this video super long. Let's look at the assignments for this week. Okay, so let's go back to course content. You remember everything is in assignments. Um, our week 3 discussion, this is very important, and it's very important that you do this discussion in a timely manner. And a couple of you have already been posting here, and I do appreciate this. What this is asking you to do is to brainstorm, and you'll do so in tandem with, in the company of, right, myself and your classmates, because you're doing it on the discussion board. Um, you know, um, is to really brainstorm about what you want to do for your poetry project. Remember, the first draft of your poetry project is due week 4, so the following week. And really, your poetry project can take the form of creating your own work of art, be it a poem, a song, podcast, a painting, drawing, so on. It can take the form of an essay. That's why, and I talked about in a previous in my video last week, the inclusion of the literary criticism pieces, right? Is to sort of make you aware, reiterate the various different critical lenses that you might want to about with which you might want to approach the work. But the idea is that you via some medium, right? Be it via art, be it essay, etc., that you um, express something significant, meaningful, etc., about the works that we're reading, one or more of the works that we're reading. Um, you know, your poem, or something else. But the idea is that you're expressing meaning, you're expressing significance, and you're doing it relative to poetry, relative to what we are um, covering this semester, etc. Um, I am open um, to your input, to your suggestions, any ideas that you may have. The idea is that you um, this is your coup de grace, if you will. This is your shining light uh, for the semester, right? This is the place where you articulate um, what it is that you're learning, etc. It can be through again, it can be through your own piece. Your own piece can be um, something relative to something meaningful to you, um, indicative of, be it either the style or the philosophy, etc., of something that we've covered this term, which is actually going to fairly easy because if you look at the stuff for week 4, um, almost all rules, quote unquote, are thrown out the window. But in the postmodern movement, post World War II, right? Um, but it can be um, a response to. It could also, this is a semicolon, right? It could also be in response to a work that we have looked at. For example, like uh, or a response to a poet. For example, Supermarket in California by Ginsberg directly engages Whitman, and he actually goes out for an evening with Whitman, right, and so forth. Um, the Pact also does that. I do not know why there is a hand raise on the recording. Anyway, disregard that. Um, so anyway, I hope that that makes sense, right? And then Poetry Journal 3, we're looking at you're looking at the works that you've been reading during week 3, and and so forth, and essentially doing what most of you have already been doing, right? Um, just looking forward, week 4, um, you've got a discussion board, which really covers the postmodern movement. And then you've got your first draft of your poetry project. Your first draft of your poetry project, it should be cohesive enough so that I understand what you're doing. But it does not in any way sort of have to be uh, perfect, if you will, right? Um, I do want to emphasize that for that you want to get that in as quickly as possible so that you can have feedback on it. Okay. I hope that makes sense. And if you have any questions about the poetry project this week, obviously you can actually, as a matter of fact, you can address that in the discussion board, right? For week 3, you can talk about, not only your ideas, obviously, but also your questions regarding the poetry project. And again, I really appreciate um, those that are diligently participating in the course. Um, I know, again, that's not, as of right now, that's not everybody, but I also know that life is life. And I do fully anticipate that, you know, the rest of you will be participating as we move along. Um, Again, the poetry project is an important uh, fixed moment, if you will, to to take a phrase from Doctor Who, a fixed moment, if you will, that's very important for the course. And so I would emphasize that you do not want to be late with, particularly with the week 3 discussion uh, or the um, or the first draft of your poetry project. And again, um, as long as you're trading in significance, meaning in what's important about a given work, or you create your own work and in the reflection to it that you would include, you talk about significance, meaning, so that's really what's um, important about the poetry project. That's what's important about generating knowledge, right? As opposed to parroting knowledge. A lot of you are seniors and so forth, so you well understand this, that in academia, right, what we do is we create knowledge and we share knowledge with each other that we create, as opposed to parroting knowledge, just repeating stuff, right? And a lot of you in in what you've done so far, right, with the discussion board and so forth, you are making strides in doing that. You're talking about, you feel that X is significant because, right? And it's that in the because um, phrasing, um, for lack of a better metaphor at this exact moment, um, is essential, right? It's the why, why is something important, and so on. And again, you can create your own work, be it a work of art in response to poetry, much like, say, for example, Gustave Doré's illustrations of Rime of the Ancient Mariner is an example. um, you know you can create a song. Some of you actually create songs. It's what you do on your own time, etc. You can do that, and of course we've had a couple of examples of those so far, and so on. You can do, but the important point is that with that creation, right, you also include a reflective piece that talks about why that's important and why you did that, and what you're trying to convey to your audience, and for that matter, who your audience is, right? Because your audience may not be me. It probably isn't me, right? I evaluate you in terms of the course and so on and so forth, and do a lot of clerical things, but your audience is probably not me, right? And I totally get that, right? Whereas your audience for a discussion board, so it's an audience for creative work is very different, say, for an audience for like a discussion board post or a journal. Your audience in that case probably to a great degree is me, uh, and or including, particularly for the discussion board posts, your colleagues in the class. The discussion board posts, the audience is all of us, right? And for the journals, I mean, obviously nobody else is reading it but myself, and so maybe that your audience for those is me. But for your creative work, your audience may not be me, right? It probably isn't. I would hope it's not, right? Because that's a very limited audience. Your audience may be yourself. Your audience may be God, as you conceive of God. It may be your community. It may be people who aren't even born yet. It could be people who are deceased, like specific people who are deceased, etc. It could be, like I said, a given poet, or so on, right? Anyway, this video has probably gone on longer than anybody wants it to have. So I will conclude. All right, I'll probably pop in later in week 3, or Monday or Tuesday with some other material. But okay, this is our, again, week 3 overview, and this should be posted um, probably Friday the 19th. Okay, all right. Have a great weekend, everybody.